Thank you, thank you, thank you.
Thank you. Happy Juneteenth, y'all. All you beautiful black people. Man. All right, y'all. So I still hear some talking. We're gonna play a little game. Can you turn to your neighbor and say, shh?
How's that for Juneteenth? Yes.
Teach us thy ways.
Turn to your neighbor.
We got neighbors, y'all. Welcome, everybody. I feel super grateful to be here with y'all. My name is Nate Nichols, founder, creative director at Palette Group, co-founder of Allyship in Action. And I get to sit with some beautiful, beautiful humans that are doing some amazing work throughout the ecosystem of our industry. And each are doing the work to ensure that there's more access, there's more equity and more inclusion in ways that are very non-traditional. And by that I mean, we have folks like Kai Devereaux Lawson, who has not just been the senior vice president of Dentsu Creative for I don't know how many years now, but founded a podcast with our homie Simeon to make beautiful narratives online about this work for years now. And so you have people like Kai Lawson in a leadership role who's able to tap, you know, a Shauna Saracen, who is, in my brain, like, in my brain, right? Like, in reality, she is the only representation of production companies on Earth in her skin tone. She has the largest roster of directors of color around the entire globe, which is awe-striking. And please, yes, do give her an applause. Then we have Liv, EVP of Agami, Emmy Award winning, Cannes Lion Grand Prix winning.
Okay.
I'm just gonna shut up after that. And Kamiko, who we don't really talk much about the importance of journalism and the value of storytelling, honest storytelling. And Kamiko's been doing this for I don't know how long either. But I will say the work she's doing as the senior marketing reporter at DigiDay, I've been a part of and seen the expression come through authentically and felt how she's helping lionize more people of color throughout this industry. And so I just want y'all to know the people sitting before you that are gonna share some of the things that we're gonna talk about today are more than qualified. They're doing work every day, every second, even while they're on these stage with us sitting. So with that, we're gonna dive in. And we're here talking about accountability and DE&I work in advertising. And about a year ago and some change, you guys remember the black squares? How many of y'all remember the black squares? Disrespectful black squares. In those press releases, there were a lot of things said. And then we saw those black squares again. These press releases came out and there were a lot of names named and people talking about what accountability could look like. But then you see and feel what accountability and DE&I work has felt like over the past decade or two. And so there was this question of what does it actually look like? How do we hold these new systems that are not new accountable in the future? And so these women, we're gonna talk about the different ways that we've seen it happen. And so the first question to you all is, what has accountability from a successful perspective, look like for all of your individual seats in your individual verticals in the ecosystem, in ways that are great, in ways that are potentially like, hey, y'all, I need some improvement?
I guess I can start. So I'll start by saying I'm really excited about this conversation particularly because I think, Nate, to your point, we're in this space where over the years we look at DE&I as like a person's job. But the reality is that we work in a full system, a whole ecosystem of an industry where we rely on each other to build product, we rely on each other to build awareness, we rely on each other to build careers. And so if the industry as a whole is a system, then that means that we all contribute to that system and therefore have the opportunity to make the change. I think, you know, in my area of the industry, on the creative side, at an agency, as a DE&I leader, and as someone who has, you know, sat there in production, in project management, in operations, and can see the business at all of the different levels, you know, I feel that it is my job, it is my duty to help to bring these conversations to the table, just as a producer would on a movie, just as a project manager would for a campaign, just to make sure that the right people are in the room, that they're having the right conversations, that they're meeting the right people, so that we are able to push things forward, not just quickly, but as effectively as possible. And so I think that was part of what kind of called my team and I to bring this conversation to the table. And so hopefully everyone here and those that are listening and those that you meet later today are able to take something with them to actually actively use later to actively, proactively make some change.
So it sounds like, Kai, like the fact that you've been in the game at every level and experiencing what accountability could look like from your personal POV has helped shape some of the dialogue we're having today, and how you just want everyone to experience action after moving past this. And so, you know, I want to hear from Shauna's perspective, like, what is it like on the production front line? What does accountability and visibility look like for you, you know, outside of Free the Work?
Well, there's a lot happening. I come from the agency side, so I have two different perspectives on how things are changing. Back in my day, on the agency side, it was really, really hard to see anyone of color doing directing, editing, special effects, animation, and I knew there was a niche in the market, not only because I am someone of color, but it's because it was out there and no one was looking, no one was searching. And when I left the industry and started up Minerva with my business partner, Mary Knox, I made it a vow to myself, because it's important, we all need to do our part, right? I made it a vow to myself and to my lovely boys at home that I will seek that talent and I will do my best to try and nurture that talent, put that talent in front of people that are making all these decisions and not looking at them, trying to purvey an instinct, as in, you know, they want to shoot a pink elephant, but there's no pink elephant on this young director's reel. Well, gosh darn it, he can do it. So I'm constantly out there pushing. And, as you know, I do have all sorts of directors that I look after, but it's the minority that still to this day, we are still struggling to be heard, to be seen. And yes, there's some top black directors coming in the scene at the moment with these really top A-class production companies, but the raw, the rough, they're still not being heard or seen, and they're out there and they're just as talented. They just need someone to voice for them and to show them that they can do it, basically.
I echo that. I think from a multicultural perspective, we have a unique opportunity to see across the holistic wheel. We understand the complexities the clients are facing within their organization, and then we also understand the stakeholders. You have digital, you have in-store, you have social, you have all these other entities who are also dealing with the complexities within their agency. The accountability is on everyone. The responsibility is on the expert to, one, identify the system within their organization and then create a common system to bring along the individuals who you want, right? So the few are understanding and seeing the gaps, and creating a system now helps the individuals you want to bring along the journey so that you're now having measurable impact. Yeah. What do you think from from a
Well,
journalistic perspective?
It's tough to follow up behind you ladies, I'll say that much. But from a journalistic perspective, I think one thing that's important to keep in note and in mind is that journalism is the marrying of storytelling on one hand, and on the other hand, service. And I think when you get down to the root of things, keeping those two things in mind really help and go hand in hand with the idea of accountability, because it puts it at the center of things. So if you're doing your due diligence, following up on leads, if a story happened a year ago, we're a year out, what happened? Where do we follow up with that? I think that's a large part of what accountability looks like for us. Once you move beyond the idea of solely basing your journalism on page views and, you know, fireside chats and things like that, and get back to the storytelling and the service, that's where the accountability comes in for us.
I love that. Yeah.
I have so many more questions about journalism, but we're going to save those for later. I have a question for the crowd quickly. And we talked from the macro level really quickly about how each one of these individuals represent a piece of the ecosystem, but they affect all of us as individuals. And what I'd like to speak to for a beat is, how are you all feeling? Like, have you felt safer in your work environment? So if you could, like, raise your hand and be honest, like, psychologically safe, emotional safe, like, do you feel comfortable being fully expressed in your Zoom rooms with some of your colleagues, let alone going back into the office with your colleagues? Like, if you feel 60 to 70% safe enough to be your whole self in every one of those Zoom rooms in your conference room, please raise your hand.
Shout out to the folks for
Someone's
raising their
bossing the
hand. We see you. We see
I
you.
would say, like, you know, half of the room, which is impressive, right? It's very impressive, because I've been a leader in the room and I felt not safe around myself. And it's real. We have real challenges where we make decisions that not everyone agrees with, and that affects people's livelihoods in different ways. And so my question to the crew, you know, how do you think, when you're dealing with challenges in the workplace that are, you know, sort of emotionally informed by bias or personal biases crept into how the systems are blocking opportunities for diversity, you know, what are ways you're seeing people navigate that as an individual, and what are ways have you navigated those challenges as individuals, like really pushing through bias to, like, elevate your careers and have upward mobility?
I'll start by saying I made a conscious decision to leave general market agency to go to a multicultural firm that's specialty, because there was a internal struggle where I felt like I had to stifle my true self, and it was also stifling my creativity. I couldn't say the thing because I was like, are they going to look at me differently? So I made that conscious choice. Yes, it's smaller. Yes, it's boutique. But our culture is where we take care of the whole person, and the whole person is touching your project. So you have to have that level of intention, and our leadership team knows that. And it's a choice. For us, we are aware of what is happening in the world that's touching not just the Black audience, but the Hispanic audience, the AAPI audience, the LGBTQIA audience, and we bring that to our calls and we have conversations about it. We also provide resources across HR, across even our internal cohorts, to make sure the whole person is being looked after, and that's the only way you're going to be able to have individuals push forward narratives. And so for me, it's a personal conscience, because I sit on our leadership team, and I'm looking at one of our leaders saying, y'all see the news, what we doing about this thing? Because it is important to understand how the world impacts your employees. Yeah.
I want to follow up there from a journalism perspective. It's really interesting that you asked that question, because that is an age-old debate in our industry.
100%.
When bias is involved, where do you draw the line? And I think previously, definitely prior to 2020, we had a hard line that was drawn, where your personal experience and things like that were not involved in your reporting at all. Now, I think after 2020, we are being asked to lean in. What do you, as a marginalized person, bring to this story? What is the idea that only you can get to because of your personal experience? And I think that allows you to peel back layers to that storytelling, really dig in, and do a better job of making sure that the story in its complexity is told.
And I think that's what we're seeing with leaders as well. When you think about the CMOs and the CEOs who are making a conscious shift internally, if it doesn't start at the top and the realization that I have to be mindful of what is happening within my organization, you're not going to be able to create those initiatives and the safety needed to be able to have your employees move forward.
And for me, it's production-wise for directors. I'm on the advisory board committee for a company, organization, called CDDP, which is Commercials Directors Diversity Program. And there they are seeking minorities that do not have the availability for them to produce, to direct commercials. So what they do is they try and reach out to agencies, other production companies to contribute money so that these young and older directors that do not have an opportunity
I love that.
try and make a spec commercial.
Yeah, that's awesome.
And it is awesome because there are people out there that, you know, they have everything it takes. And all they want to do is just be signed to a production company. But then you do get signed to a production company and then you're just sat on the shelf. No one's looking for you. No one's representing you. The EPs are too busy dealing with their A-list. So who's looking out for you? So this organization is really good. And I think if there are some young directors out there or directors out there that are still, you know, trying to find their way, they should look into this program and get on board, because what it gives you, it teaches you how to communicate, how to work with agencies, how to work with a client, a brand client, and you get a really good spec on your reel from a really top production company and agency. I mean, I can't say any more than that.
That is
yeah?
crazy.
Okay.
And this
I
is
love
like a
that.
good example of systems that are non-traditional that offer up opportunities for upward mobility and access, right? Like a very simple solve of crowdsourcing funds to support creatives that will have challenges in their personal world and don't have the means necessary to achieve that next level. So really beautiful reference. Thank you for that, Shauna. And take us someplace at a macro level, Kai, because you're managing something at a global scale, and I'm wondering how you all at that level ensure people feel whole, you know, at Dentsu Creative.
Yeah, I spoke a little bit earlier with my industry bestie. Shout out to Snapchat for hosting that conversation. But one of the things that I called out is, you know, I remember me coming into the industry. One of the things that I realized is that, you know, the industry isn't intuitive to just kind of like know how to position yourself once you're in here. It is not, you know, what was intuitive to me was when I was the cashier girl at American Eagle back in the day. Like, I just gotta say hi and ring you up when you picked out the clothes you want, right? It's not that linear when you come into this side of the business. And so for me, it's been very important as a leader and to really help my team also push and understand the importance of normalizing what it looks like to start by bringing pieces of yourself, to validate that it is okay that you might be different. It is okay if you don't feel your English is that great. It is okay if this is your first time as an art director. It is okay if there's something that just makes you feel different. And oftentimes it's in small spaces that those conversations happen, that those moments to normalize happen. But that's what's important, is to make people understand that what you're bringing to the table is valuable. And I think starting to ingrain that and embed that into the process of our work, that it's okay not to know, it's okay to learn, it's okay to ask for help, and it's also okay to be different. It actually might be the coolest thing you ever do in your career to be different. That's kind of what you know, my team and I, we've been really pushing and impressing onto our young folks. I tell our interns all the time and other folks that ask for advice, they're like, what piece of advice would you give? And it's, you were hired for a reason. You were hired for what you know. You gave an interview based on the information you had before you got the job, not for what things that don't exist. And so to really stand confident in what you know is what you know, and what you don't know is what you're going to learn, and nothing else will matter to affect that, because the industry as a whole is evolving anyway. And so being that team, being that discipline, being that person to kind of be the beacon of normalcy, of normalizing normalcy, I think is kind of what allows us to stand out and be a little bit more diligent with our inclusive work.
Now, can
And
I
I
ask
think
a
that's
practical?
why, and conversations like this, where you're seeing Black women in leadership positions, also helps. But one of the lessons is the fact that there's only one of you, and what you bring is different than anyone else. Own that. I mean, we got to refine it. I know Beyonce is saying bring your cozy self. I say bring your best cozy self, because I don't want the
said
pajamas. I
pre-cozy?
want it to
You
be
bring your
together.
pre-cozy
Bring
self?
best cozy self. But ultimately, and I think about the value, the multicultural audience is here. If you're not programming for them, you're behind. You might be the next blockbuster. So you have to consider that if you're not doing marketing, and Mark Pritchard says this, if you're not doing multicultural marketing, you're not doing marketing. And so you have to think about your young talent as almost your first kind of introduction into testing. Is this going to work for my young talent? Because if it's not, then it's probably not going to work for Gen Z. They have a valid POV. Now it's the job of the senior individuals to kind of shape the sound bites and how they deliver that so it's respectful and you're doing it in the right way.
And I guess I even want to add to that, because I think sometimes when we have this part of the conversation, we're talking about young talent, right? And I want to clarify, you could be grown as hell, and it might be the first time somebody validates that what you're bringing to the table is important, is valuable, is helpful, is innovative, and is what we need. And so just throughout the ranks, just ensuring that we're constantly validating everyone's strength as different. At the more awkward, the more different, the more off the kilter, the more rough around the edges, the more valuable you are to us, because that's in an industry where we technically all do the same thing. That's the thing that makes you stand out,
Yeah.
Can I ask a more black and white question for y'all? Because it's dope that we talking about being whole and talking about respecting and honoring people's feelings, but can you give some tangible ways in which the crowd can walk away to potentially understand how they could bring to the organization what it means to measure success in feeling whole, right? I get that we could talk about feeling whole, but how are we measuring success? There's the cute, this is the best office of the year, article once a year, and maybe we're looking at that, you don't even know if the trades paid them or not, but how are we able to measure what feeling good looks like in these organizations at all those different levels?
Well, we do sensing. We ask the employees, tell us, is this a place that you want to work? And we are, shout out and shameless plug, Igami's hiring, we are best place to work because of our core values. We do the right thing. We are relationship focused. We are humble. We're not Drake. We're not wearing all the chains in the house, but we have awards as well. And so we encourage that, but at our organization, we shape the individual so that you're bringing your best professional self. No matter what. Yes, your best professional self, right? Keep that other stuff in the house, please. And we do value what employees have to say, and we are small enough now and nimble enough to make those real life changes and real time changes once we get that. But I think not only do you ask, but you also have to take the good and the bad. There may be some comments within leadership, you're like, oh, we do that, and then you owe it to your company, but your leadership team to say, well, how are we going to fix that? Why are we doing that? And is that an opportunity for us to change? I think that is real accountability, and that is real leadership.
I think there are some agencies out there that are doing it right. I don't want to bring up names, but there are some agencies out there that are getting it right. And getting it right in a sense of, not 100%, but they're making a massive effort for this diversity inclusion. And we keep talking about this diversity and inclusion. We keep talking, and it's getting boring. And I'm sure DEI is going to change to something else soon. Yeah. But if we carry on it's just going to keep scratching the surface, right? Until we get to where we're going. It's going to be a long time, but I do see a change. And there are, like I said, there are some agencies that are hitting it right and still wanting to learn and listening to their colleagues and listening to their employees. They want to keep them. They want to keep them happy, and they want to be able to make things comfortable. And I am seeing it. I'm seeing it by when I get a lead and a producer calls me up and says, oh, no, we actually are looking for a person of color for this particular job. Yeah. And it's better than getting an email saying, we would like a person of color, because that we would like means it's not going to happen. They're just trying to fill a quota. And that's a shame, because there's some real talent out there, and we all deserve a chance to be seen, heard, show ourselves, and be creative in what we're doing.
I would say from my vantage point, what I see as tangible success, or the way I judge success, it's 100% different, I think, than most people, right? Like, for those of you that know me or have ever read anything I've written, I challenge the inquiry for data all the time, because for me, it's the context of the data is equally as important as the percentages that we see. And so as a leader internally, what I look for is the quality of conversations people are having, similar to what Shauna said. Do we want to have more representation on the team, or we'd like to see what you have? You know, is it a passive approach, or is it a proactive approach, an active approach? Another way that I like to look at success is people will tell you how they feel. People are going to let you know. And I recognize sometimes people, you know, will look at that. They'll look at, you know, shout out to Fishbowl. I'm sure folks are here on the ground, but like a glass door of Fishbowl, it's like, oh, that's just people complaining. But is it a lot of people complaining, right? And are those complaints being addressed? For me as a leader, am I addressing like the things that I'm seeing? Am I being diligent about somebody saying, I need this, and that's the thing that they get? I also look at success by how often people recommend their friends to come work with us. I think that's something that I actually pride myself on and my team on at Dentsu. It's a lot of people that get recommended for roles. And the reality is, you're not trying to have somebody come over your house if it's dirty, right? Yeah. You're not trying to have somebody come over your house if you know you have rain coming through. So the fact that someone is willing to open up their network to our home, our work home, is special to me, and that's an indicator that that person felt more comfortable than I would expect them to in an industry that's not intuitive, to want their people to be a part of that. And so the more I see that, in not just pockets, but in pools and puddles, I think that that's how I judge the success. Yes, the numbers are important, but are the numbers connecting to the behaviors that we're seeing?
That's huge, yeah.
Yeah, I think I could probably go along the same lines of what you're saying, but from a journalism perspective, obviously. I think oftentimes throughout my career, I have found myself the only person of color in the room. And one thing that I cannot say loud enough about Digiday and the team there is that there's a big emphasis on listening and hearing, so that you get to bring your entire self to work. When I have a story idea that focuses on D&I, focuses on people that look different from, you know, the mainstay, I'm encouraged to pursue that. And I feel like that is, internally a very important part. Externally, I think, again, it's easy to get caught up in the numbers of, you know, how many page views did this get? How many clicks did this get? What was the engagement? What were the likes and things like that? But again, if you get back to the idea of the storytelling and the service of it all, I think you do a better job of I guess, honing in on the measurement beyond the metrics and look at what are the conversations that are happening. And journalism has the power to have your Watergate moment and change laws. And that is something to keep in mind when you do the work, you know? a company reads it, and the next thing you know, you've got policy changes, across the board. And I think that's where we come in.
It's interesting you bring that up. I know you have more questions, but I don't know who has a master class subscription, or a friend with a master class subscription, or uncle or auntie. I know we share logins these days. I am a login. I care for a family who needs me to work so I can give them their logins, right? But I was watching Masterclass, and there was a woman speaking about the 2008 financial crisis, and one of the things that she said to me that resonated in the work that we do is exactly what you're talking about, right? The balance sheets can look perfect, but if we're not clear on how that's actually connecting and how process is actually being handled, it becomes flimsy. It becomes a straw house. It's not something that's sustainable, and eventually will, it will fall in on itself. And so those are things that I think are just important to know across the board. What's behind the scenes has to match what's on in front of the stage, and I feel like that's what allows for us to have sustainable growth, change, and transition.
Yeah.
Sounds like context is queen. We all need to wake up to be bad bitches.
Yeah. Yeah.
It's the
So-
hair, the way she just swung the hair. Did you see that? It was very aggressive. It was like, yeah.
So I want to talk about the future for a couple beats, because it's just kind of cool to always have this conversation consistently over and over and over, and we see the same faces over and over and over, and it's kind of sad, because this work shouldn't belong to the few faces. It shouldn't belong to the press headlines, to the one person doing the talk over and over again. We should be cheering these people on, but also creating access for others. And so my question is how can we, from our vantage point, support each other? How can the holding company support the indie shops? How can the indie shop be supported by journalism and lionized more so by journalism? How can the production representation and director representation feel like they have access to their stories being shared more globally? So how can we all just support each other in a more compassionate way and scalable way from your vantage points?
I'm going to start with this one. Well, for me, with production companies, it comes from the agency side. So it comes from the creatives. Really good black creatives that have a voice step through to their ECDs and the likes of, and just say, no, this is what I want. I find that these creators have the power to change a lot, but sometimes, I don't know in their work life whether they are put in a box for some reason, but they have so much power. Rather than relying on the producers to give them the information, they should be seeking it out themselves. And just knowing what's out there and not following the norm, not be lazy, not go with, well, I know that black director, so let's just stick with him. There's so many of us, and there's so many Asians, so many, I could go on, and they're really all good at what they do. And I think creative-wise, we need to get off our bums and just really seek and look and stop being complacent, because we can be.
Yeah, it's a nuanced question. It's a nuanced question. It's a very nuanced answer, because from a multicultural perspective, we are a small shop and we are servicing really large Fortune 500 companies. I think there's a level of honesty that needs to happen internally. Say, you know what, we have this big client and they're asking this of us. Can we do it? Can we do it excellently? Let me say that. And if we can't, what does help look like? At IGAMI, when the tragic death of George Floyd happened, our phones did not stop ringing, and we had to say no. And we realized, well, how are we paying bills if we say no? And so that was kind of the beginnings of, we need to ask for help. That's a clue. If you're a small shop, you may need to ask for help to figure out, well, how am I gonna grow? And guess what? You may need to look at an agency. For us, we went to our global partners. We have a strategic partnership with the Zeno Group. And they partnered with us, and we're calling it our partnership agency allyship because they're mutually part of what we do. They are really committed to our growth, to our goals. And because of that, we've seen growth across business, across talent. I'm learning a ton around strategy and planning. And because we were able to ask for help, they are also partnering with us to grow us. And I think that individuals are not really willing to be vulnerable to say, listen, I'm going to need a big shop to help me through my next X, my next growth. I think that's valid, and I think that's huge. I think the system is built this way. I think there's an avant-garde and a divergent way to go about identifying ways to solve it and rebuild that system for the greater good of us all.
I think when it comes to the idea of, again, storytelling and journalism, we can often get caught up in the idea of, I've got good news, I'm ready to share it. However, I think journalism can also be seen as a little bit of a black box sometimes in terms of how it works. You've got the 7 news values. I won't run through the list, but you have the idea of dog bites man, not a story. Man bites dog, now you have a story. But it's more than that. It's a relationship between the people that are telling the stories and the people that are reporting, the stories. And I think once you move beyond the idea of, we've hit our diversity numbers, I'd like to get this published, and it turns into a communicative way between two parties where I can come to you and say, hey, I know the diversity numbers that you had last time weren't good, but let's tell the context behind that. Let's tell the story behind that. And make sure that that reporting goes all the way across the beats, whether it be marketing, media, agencies, creative, because it touches everything.
I have a slight story, and then it actually goes into answering the question. And so
Thanks for the preface.
Yes, no, I'm just letting y'all know. In 2020, I had my mentor and my boss at the time, Judy Jackson at WPP, opened her Rolodex to me. And it was whoever you want to talk to, whoever
That's
in the
amazing.
industry, anybody you want to ask a question to, just let me know. Because we were home, and you gotta keep busy, right? And I hope she's okay with me saying this, but one of the people that I spoke to over the phone after she was coming from yoga was Ann Fudge. For those of you that are familiar with the historical context of advertising and Black women leadership, etc. And Ann Fudge actually was at the head of an agency at that time. I don't know what they want me to share, so I won't go that deep. But Ann Fudge is the name you have to Google. And I asked her, what is the thing that you really wanted to see more of when you were at the helm of that agency? And she said, when you look at advertising, you look at the 50s, 60s, 70s, 80s, and even the 90s, there was a bravery and a courage that people were bringing to the table. They were willing to take risks. That's how they just dropped the Jordan movie on Prime, I think it was. There was a lot of risks being taken, a lot of new things being challenged, a lot of systems being broken and rebuilt, a lot of expectations completely shifting. And she said, coming in the early 2000s into this role, she said she started to see the decline in the courage and more of like a templatized thinking or a templatized approach to doing the work. And so that kind of stuck with me from there, because what it meant was, it's not sexy in advertising if you're not taking a risk. It's not sexy in production if you're not really finding the diamond in the rough producer and director. It's not sexy if we're only allocating certain resources to multicultural agencies instead of giving them the pie. Like, what happens when you flip that budget on its head and you allocate differently? It's not sexy even in the media if we're always telling the same stories. Then we're just reading the same stories across different mediums. And so I guess my challenge and what I think is really important is that we take more risks being different and working and pushing against the grain, even if it's once a year or once every other year, and giving yourself that, that stretch goal. We give ourselves stretch goals everywhere else. What does a stretch goal look like on the conversation of accountability and inclusion, and how do we kind of stand 10 toes down into making decisions in that way?
So keep on challenging the status quo even in DE&I.
Always ask why. Always ask why,
Dope.
how, and how can we be better?
Dope. And I have one more question, and you know, there are some like DEI leaders in the crowd as well, and there's this moment where you realize when you do this work how hard it is on you as an individual. And so my question to you all is like, how can we support each other to make sure we're all not burning out doing this work? Because if we all burn out, then there is no sustainability in this work and no scalability in this work, right? Because we have to make sure that we're able to stay mentally fresh to give, you know, this sauce in the way that's nourishing for others to be able to take it and give it nourishingly. We can't give toxic DE&I support out. So like, how can we do it in a way that's supportive and compassionate and to each other?
Well, Nate, I'm going to flip it. I'm going to ask you that question. Because you have an agency, you also do production. What are you doing?
It's a really good question. It is.
I think you're doing a lot, you know?
Yeah, I think to Kai's point a second ago is really, really challenging how much I'm allowing all of us to have a voice, not just myself, but the team in whatever discussions they want to talk about. It's why we founded Allyship in Action. We felt like we didn't feel safe in our bodies from so many different directions, and some people didn't feel like they knew how to support us. And so, you know, my life partner, who was a German woman, was like, I don't know how to support this situation. And I was like, cool, I know a bunch of humans who can talk about supporting it. And that's what we did. We facilitated that. And that wasn't something a group Black invested in or an IPG invested in at the time. It was something organic that we just did from the muscle, right? And it was because folks like Adem in the front row here who had a capacity to just learn how to live stream. And then we were just doing live streams on the internet. And it was just like us supporting each other, right? And this gentleman in the front row, we met at a bar 5 years ago. And now he's leading and producing some of the, you know, top work we've ever done in the history of our entire production company and agency, you know, working with global brands sitting in Cannes, you know, south of France. And so for me, it's ensuring that we're supporting each other and creating a space where people are fully expressed and being able to say the things that are hard, right, on a platform where they can see that people are taking their voice seriously and being heard, but then also being fully expressed on the other side and ensuring that, like, hey, if you want to be a rapper in the industry and you want to feel rapper, you want to give rapper in your creative direction, I'm here for it, you know? It is healing for me because all Palette Group is a platform, right? A palette is just a platform for an artist's medium, whatever it may look like. And so that's how I do it.
I'm actually curious on how you do it because you have a weight of journalism and having to put away your emotional kind of perspective and write for the masses. So how are you handling the emotional strain that you have?
If this is a way of asking about my mental health, well,
Kind of. Adjacent.
I do feel like, again, going back to the idea of making sure that the reporting and the general, we at work we call it our North Stars, the main ideas and themes that we touch on as we're doing the work. And I think as long as it crosses the borders and there's a cohesive effort, which I feel like we have, it eases the burden and also allows for collaboration to really take ideas beyond working in silos and make sure that, again, there's, you know, this is a very complex idea, but you're able to tackle it when you're not doing it by yourself, when you've got the entire, you know, newsroom behind you and making sure that we've got points A, B, and C covered in the way that we're reporting out. You do it for any other thing that you were, you know, covering, regardless of what your beat is, whether it be a crime beat at a local metro newspaper or if it be marketing and advertising. You know, you approach it the same way. It's the basics principles of journalism.
I love that. There are a few things that I do. One, I take clarity breaks, and that's where I shut everything off. There's no social media. There's no news. If the BET Awards is happening during my clarity break, I'm not, because I don't know how to shut off being a consumer versus a marketer. I'm like, oh, I wonder if that tree was an integration somewhere, right? Because I'm always thinking about, like, work. And so for me, a clarity break where I pour into myself, this is a way to pour into myself because I'm with like-minded individuals. Sometimes I call my colleagues and I say, this is what's happening, and it helps kind of break down some of that. I think we had a podcast around like the emotional burden and the weight of the work. I rely on my client partners. Some of them are in the room now where it's like, we understand the lift, and there's something about the camaraderie that makes it better because it's like I'm arming the individual for them to go do the fight, and then they're kind of reporting back saying this is what happened, and we jointly move the needle forward. I think doing it alone, you will burn out way quicker than doing it with partners. And our relationship, and because our core value at Igami is relationship focused, our approach to the client partner is one where we're fostering and growing that relationship so we can really understand there's a brief, and what's not in this brief, homie? Like, what are we trying to do so that we can understand how we're moving together? That is an important nuance to be able to meet and troubleshoot some of the objectives we're trying to do.
Well, like you mentioned, you know, partners and clients, once you've got their support, you know, the world is your oyster, so to speak. But I started Minerva with my business partner 2015. And what I found that needed to be replaced, I didn't have the support because no one could see it like I could see it. So it did take a while. It did. But because I know the industry and I've been in the industry, I knew I would just have to persevere to get there. And something will drop and it will happen. And it has. Minerva's been 8-9 years now, and I'm pleased to say my clients really rely on my eye, my information, my social butterflying. They rely on a lot of it, and it comes back, it reaps rewards. So I'm very comfortable at the moment.
Being your whole self.
Yeah.
Love that for you, sis. And I think we're going to close out now.
Yeah, we can close out. I guess I'll just finish. I think for my
Close it
mental
out.
health, it's my family, it's the homies, it's my podcast as an outlet, it's my blog as an outlet, and like those are the things that like I control. And so when it's not working on the other side, or it becomes too stressful, or it becomes too muddied, or not, there's no light ahead, I just lean into the things that I can control. Because what's going to happen is going to happen. But I have to make sure that I'm okay in order to help everything that I said, those actionable measures, in order to help other people be okay too. So.
Take them to church. Thank you, Kai. Thank you, Shauna. Thank you, Liv. Thank you, Kamiko. We are a wrap. We're going to pass to the next panel. Thank you so
Inkwell.
much.
Thank you,
Thank you,
Dentsu.
Inkwell.
Stay nourished, y'all.
Thank you.